it looks like the general conversation for general group expansion is back on the table. And this one I am very happy about because it means that the number or the general majority of T.A.C.T players do care about where the future of the group goes from here following Transformers. And I appreciate that. And there's a number of ideas here that have been gathered from Jazz, Death Guns, Galvatron, Megadeth, Doug, the son of Atkiss, RedPrimus, and Flintheart. And so before we get to what ideas are presently on the table given by those said individuals, I'm going to take a second here in order to reflect on when the first conversation had happened, because I'm sure you guys are wondering, wait a minute, if we're having this conversation now that's coming back up again, when exactly did it happen the first time and where was I? So let me elaborate, because the majority of you guys that are here now weren't here when the first time this had happened. You guys came in amidst the process of the aftermath of said first discussion. Let us backtrack to about almost 2 years ago, about a year and a half ago, early September of 2015. This was after me, Skull, and Argh had settled into this. Kids, Tuda, and Breakdown were there. We had settled into discussion, and online, for what the online user. We settled into discussions about how to expand the group outward past Transformers. That way we can try to have a good experience delving into different game modes and different game experiences on different adventures, rather than being structurally confined to just one specific franchise or the one game's existence. While T.A.C.T does have strong ties and originates from the Transformers franchise, it does have a very good deal of potential to branch out and be an overall general gaming group or gaming family clan for a number of different reasons, and it means a lot of things to a lot of different people over time, as it has come to be nowadays. And so as this was taken into initiative, so it was done. And so the first things that were brought to the table when Argh, myself, and Skull first put this out there was the proposition of a Minecraft branch that could be there for Jazz, Jacob, Kids, and a couple others, and this would be for that specific branch manager, which would be Larry the Third. And to keep somewhat of a structural order, whether or not this will transfer over into this perspective or not, is that a branch manager is one who has to take responsibility for the number of actions or decisions that revolve around our group existing or coexisting on that server or grid, or coexisting alongside other players. Discussions, differences in opinion, and other things in between that may or will come up over time as people's comfort level will increase. And that is what you want. It's for people to be comfortable enjoying themselves on different grids. How each experience does differ in that regard, that's what has to be taken in tow by the person overseeing that series of actions or activities. That's where the branch manager name comes into play. That way you're that person that has to take responsibility for everything that's being associated with us in said environment. Minecraft's activities, this was given to Larry the Third to try that out. And so that idea was done as the first branch off. The second branch off that had happened was between Destiny and Borderlands 2. Now, the Borderlands 2 idea was brought up originally by Tiggle at the time, and it was taken into effect by him, myself, Kids, and I believe Jacob at the time. But again, that idea was pretty good, and it delved into a lot of really nice activities, but it didn't last very long whatsoever. It was a one-trick pony type of idea, really. But it was a nice activity all the same for the time when it did exist. Next up on the block was the Destiny adventure and the Destiny branch, which was slow getting started but ended up being a vastly comfortable experience. However, it didn't come without its share of drama that came right at the get-go, which kept nagging down people's necks as this went along. And by that I mean it was a select handful of people having their personal opinion overlap with that of a general perspective, and it tainted the general explanation that they wanted to have about the situations because they felt they could have done it better but didn't do it better, and the person who was put in charge of the said thing didn't execute it as best as they could, or it was seen that they couldn't execute it as best as they could for things that went on over in Destiny. And the explanation in that was exaggerated numerous different times because of a sense of superiority in events or in viewing people. And this eventually went from a small handful of people to just one person's perspective in viewing a sense of superiority over a lot of people that were just playing the game just to enjoy the game, and a sense of superiority over the person put in charge of the branch in order to oversee to make sure that said simplicity in gameplay stays that way. And it led to a huge degradation in trying to enjoy the gameplay after a while when you know what's going on behind the scenes because of said one individual that wants to have it that way, or have it their way, and is suddenly disappointed or wants to start something indiscriminately or unannounced because he's not having it done his way, or it's not done how he would like, or he wants his input to be the overall input. It doesn't work like that. It has to be a general, all-encompassing decision that happens all around. All for one, one for all. That's how it's always been. When it originally started on Destiny, it was myself, Kids 1234 4321, online user, Tuda for the small amount of time which he did enjoy the game, then Argh came in later on, then Flintheart, then Tiggle, and Megadeth, and for the tenure which he was with us, Killer 2170. And overall it was a really nice adventure. Very good highlights, I would say, all in all, with very few dramatic minus points. And over time, as the story has been unfolded over time, T.A.C.T did eventually shut down the Destiny branch project and just left that alone. Next, amidst the Destiny project's continuation, there was also the project for Battlefield 4 that came up, but only 2 people had went on ahead and said that they wanted the branch to be open, or for us to be over there, and that was just with online user and Kids 4321 134 at that time. It was a good project when it started, but to be frank, no progress came from the group's existence over in the game, because it was only just those 2 playing the group. Nobody else in T.A.C.T had that game, so there wasn't any need for any expansion into it, to be honest. Very few people played the game competitively or in a fun mindset other than just those guys. And there was nothing consistent or steady in the way of updates or continued progress in the efforts done on the game. Because there have been many times where we come together at the end of the week in order to talk about the progress of the branches as it goes out, to see where everything is, and there hasn't been anything that has ever come from Battlefield 4's continued existence. Eventually the project did shut down, which didn't lead to any complaints as I was expecting there was, but was glad to hear that there was not. And I stood by my perspective, as did Argh in this, is because while it's nice that you have friends over there that can play it occasionally, there's no clan battles or group battles that happen over there, and there have not been any one point in time where an update, positively or negatively, had come from T.A.C.T's coexistence on Battlefield 4's grid. So it's kind of a moot point. It's fine that it existed in the first place. I'm not saying that it was a bad idea. What I'm saying is that it seemed needless or superfluous in order to have a branch there when you only really needed to have just a select amount of people. It's like you want to label it as over involvement in a common pastime or uncommon pastime, when it could just be a group of people that go over and play the game every now and again. It doesn't have to be any specific big highlight that requires a huge amount of participation, like a clan involvement. That's all I'm saying. And with those 4 points having been said and brought to the highlight of the now, that brings us to the present day. So we can now turn our attention directly to the new conversation of how T.A.C.T can try or make the effort to spread out this time, and see if we can bring a good amount of joy and satisfaction to our playing friends and comrades, all here in our big gaming family. And so let's start with a couple that are at the beginning of the chopping block that I do feel will probably be brought into a general outline. So let's go with the proposition that Flintheart did brought in, which was for Dragon Ball Xenoverse 2. Now, in summarization for those that may not have heard of Dragon Ball Xenoverse, the franchise itself, is it's a fighting role-playing video game that's made by Bandai and Dimps. It's based on the whole Dragon Ball franchise, blah 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 blah. It's got Xenoverse and Xenoverse 2. Xenoverse 1 was released back in 2015, and Xenoverse 2 here, I believe, was 2016. It has a co-op feature, so more than one person can play it at a time. I'm not sure exactly what the max is. I'm probably spitting somewhere around 4 or 5 players at a time. And it's basically the destiny of Dragon Ball and everything about Dragon Ball. And I love, and it's a very lovable and addicting gameplay. And so I can see how this could be the first one brought to the chopping block to try and see if it's a yay or a nay. The next one here that was brought up by Death Guns and by Flintheart was the proposition for a branch on Paladins, the Champions of the Realms. Now, for those of you that damn sure don't know what this is, it's a free-to-play game that you can find on PlayStation Store on PS4, first of all. So it's pretty easy to get a hold of. It's a FTP multiplayer hero shooter-based, sometimes first-person shooter, video game that was in open beta. It was released back in September of 2016 by the Hi-Rez Studios, and then the closed beta was even earlier than that, back in 16, and then it's just generally an open beta. It's a huge multiplayer-based thing, because multiplay is the way in how that whole gameplay works. So the premise of bringing that up was actually highly expected, because it's a multiplayer-based game where, just like Overwatch, it's, well, in layman's terms, it's the cheap man's Overwatch. It's the poor man's Overwatch. And it's done exactly in the same fashion, where everything is team-oriented, so you pretty much have to work as a team in order to succeed as a team. So, that being said, that's understandable why that would be here, and a pending possibility in order for us to try and delve into. Next proposition that we see on here is going to be Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six Siege. Game I personally do delve into a great deal of time when I come on PlayStation 4, following a lot of my matches and preceding stuff on PlayStation 3 and the whatnots. Personally put, it's another first-person shooter video game that's made by Ubisoft Montreal, and it's published by Ubisoft. It's the same people that made Assassin's Creed. Released back in 2015 for PS4, Xbox One, and the Windows, I do believe. The gameplay itself puts a pretty big emphasis on environmental destruction and general cooperative gameplay between players. You can solo it, but it is highly not recommended. You assume control of an attacker or a defender for differing types of game modes, like defusing a bomb or rescuing a hostage. It has no campaign, unfortunately, which is a really big bummer in the long run of good gameplay. However, the features do consist of short missions that can be played solo. And it has a loose narrative that focuses on just going over recruits, going through training to prepare them for future encounters later on down the line. or in this case, preparing the recruit, which is you, the player, for what happens later on down the line that's going to be a lot more difficult, such as doing casual with actual operators, or ranked mode against highly skilled competitive players, or competitive individuals, as it were. Uh, the predecessor for this title, Rainbow Six Patriots, was also one to bring up, but it was eventually canceled due to a lot of technological shortcomings, which were made up for in this game. Because that was also a tactical first-person shooter, so you gotta actually try to outthink your opponent or outmaneuver your opponent by using the environment as best as you can to your advantage, as well as the weapons and the tools given to you. Taking into consideration the decent and admirable amount of players intact that already do have access to this game, it's more than likely going to be a guaranteed sure thing that we're going to start our expansion here and then branch out elsewhere into the other titles aforementioned stated in this documentation. So for now, I'd probably put this as an automatic yay, but I'm not going to jump the gun fully. The next proposition for the next project in play here that was given by Aqua Megadeth, I do believe, was to go into Ghost Recon Wildlands. Ghost Recon Wildlands is a tactical shooter video game that was also made by Ubisoft Paris, technically, and then it was published by Ubisoft Incorporated directly. The game play itself, it's another installment in the whole Tom Clancy thing. It's pretty well done. It's a futuristic setting similar to the origins from the Tom Clancy Ghost Recon stories itself. It's, personally, in my opinion, it's one of the biggest open world games that Ubisoft has ever created. And the game includes so many different types of environments in order to delve into and to actually take a look into. It uses a third-person perspective with the option for first-person perspective for gun aiming. When completing missions, I know players can reach locations where the mission starts through a variety of different ways. You can literally use the environment to any type of way you want to do anything, any mission how you want to do it. It's all done as a team-based, it can be single-player or multiplayer at any time. Maximum is 4-player co-op. So you can have a maximum of up to 4 people doing the exact same thing you're doing at the same time, or one other thing and trying to juggle them, or even a third thing where you can do 2 or 3 things at one time simultaneously, and then you'll generally communicate in trying to use the environment or various other elements in order to successfully accomplish the objective without using just general, straightforward, aggressive means. I can't say for sure if this is a yay or a nay, but we'll pop it to a vote and see exactly how people will take to enjoying the gameplay after you watch a couple of vids or a documentation or a review about said game, and see where that leads. Next proposition up on the board here is one from Angelus, one of our newer members that had joined on PlayStation 4. He gave a proposition for us to try and do Dark Souls 3. Which sounds like a pretty interesting gambit. For those of us that are not aware of this, Dark Souls 3 is an action role-playing video game that's by From Software and by Bandai Namco Entertainment. It's for Windows, Xbox One, PS4. It's the 4th entry in the Souls series, pretty much. Let's see. It's an action role-playing game, like I said, in a third-person perspective, just like the past games. The outline of the gameplay: you encounter different types of enemies with different behaviors. They change their patterns due to past instances or during battles itself. There's a lot of different combat features in this game as opposed to the different ones of the past installment. There's a single player and multiplayer mode, so you can also do a lot of the story or the majority or all the story, I believe, as co-op. I'm not sure exactly how many people that can be done in a co-op mode, but it's a pretty good gameplay. There you have to outthink your opponent every single time you encounter a battle, so you can't just go straight in guns blazing trying to have the thing and try to outshoot him. You have to outthink him first, and you have to try and use not just different gameplays, but talk with your player or joining players that you're playing with, your friends, and various different elements that can encourage prior exploration of the area or continued gameplay in specifics, in trying to get used to different unique attacks and features, and the whole focus point thing that it has here, and different abilities and whatnots. There are a couple other things that I'm probably missing because it's not an RPG I generally do delve into. But for those that do know of Dark Souls 3, by all means feel free to weigh in on your thoughts concerning this proposition, and let us know what it is that you think. Let me see here. Next up is brought from Doug and Angelus again here. This one is for the game called Neo, I believe, if I'm saying this correctly. This one is an action role-playing based video game that's developed by Team Ninja for the PlayStation 4, released back in February of this year, 2017, by Koei Tecmo and Sony Interactive. The gameplay revolves around navigating different levels and defeating a lot of monsters that have infested an area or areas. And then Nihao takes the place in around the early 1600s or so during a fictionalized version of the Sengoku period in Japan. Kind of after the Warring States era, if you guys ever watched a couple anime stuff like Inuyasha or something around that same time period when Japan was amidst civil war prior to the ascension of the Tokugawa shogunate. Around that same time period, that's where this is. And then you got a sailor named William that's in pursuit of an enemy who arrives in Japan, is enlisted by Hattori Hanzo, which is a servant of the Tokugawa shogunate's representative, Ieyasu, in defeating yokai that are just flourishing in the chaoses of war. And it's like a rinse and repeat. It's like a more gory version of Kessen mixed with Assassin's Creed mechanics. And the game went through a lot of revisions since it first hit the chopping block in order to try and get it right over the past 8 years as the general franchise kept trying to do something with itself. It has a single player and a multiplayer paradigm also. So this was definitely brought into play in order to see how players can work together in order to do different tasks, if I'm looking at this correct. Again, this was another game that I didn't get a chance to take too much of a perspective into, but I'll see if I can change that during my adventures here on PlayStation 4 and see what it is that the gameplay itself has to offer that can show me what it is that Angelus and Doug wish to show you regarding the in-depth, hardcore type of tactical realism that comes with playing such a game as this. So, yay or nay will depend upon how it sounds. So just take a look at it yourself, see what it looks like, and leave it from there. And then last but not least, which was brought in from Trey or Dead 2340 something with the numbers, and then with kids, was the game called Killing Floor 2. Now, for those of you that don't know what Killing Floor is, it's another first-person shooter-based video game that was developed and published by Tripwire Interactive. It's a sequel to another game that's derived formerly from a PC. The early access to the game was given as a beta and officially released on 2016 or so on PS4 and on normal Windows and StreamOS. It's a first-person shooter survival game that you can play alone or cooperatively with up to 6 players at one time. The game is based on the first thing, where you got a whole deadly outbreak from the biotechnology of Horizons and firm. It's a deadly outbreak from the biotechnology firm Horizon that created these things called Zed, which are zombie-like creatures, basically just zombies. It's a Last of Us effect that rapidly spread across Europe, blah, 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 blah. And then you got Killing Floor 2 that takes place the month after the first game and all that crap I just said, which caused the whole government to collapse and a whole lot of very beautiful dumb shit to happen in the process that makes a really beautiful gameplay. The gameplay consists of just fighting waves and waves of Zeds, and then as waves pass, the enemy does count, and it escalates, which scales with the number of players in the game. So the more players there are in the game, the more likely the difficulty of gameplay increases, even if it's on the easiest difficulty setting given. The boss character will determine randomly upon the start of the last wave, so with each boss comes variations, and then each boss has a different strategy in order to defeat it. Unfortunately, the only setback with it still being in an unseen type of beta state of the gameplay, there's only 2 known bosses that are there in the video game, but I'd like to think that over time, there's probably going to be 1 or 2 others that are going to be introduced in order to give some type of variety. That way you're not just dealt with a fast hand or an overwhelming stacked hand. And then there's a whole lot of particular specifics that cause interesting features to happen as the game goes along. It's a nice single player or multiplayer based gameplay depending upon preference or comfortability in being with a team. Whether or not it's yay or nay, we'll see. It is a free to play game that you can find at the PlayStation Store. So by all means, if you haven't checked it out, take the time to try and check it out and see if it's for you, if you're into that whole zombie stuff or not. Anyhoodly doodle, I do believe this is about the size of it. And so now, viewers and T.A.C.T, you are aware and brought up to speed regarding the past expansion process that we've had. And and the efforts and steps that are being taken now in order to try and continue the expansion process past where we're at right now. Because it's brought to the attention that we can try and expand T.A.C.T beyond the normal illusionary limitations of just being where we're at now in adjacent to WFC and FOC and impartial Destiny 1, not in Destiny 1. And now we can try and establish something on PlayStation 4 with the majority being 50-50, establish something on PlayStation 4, and then see if we can slowly begin to spread out from there and expand the different gaming experiences that are. This being because with the amount of players that T.A.C.T has, or gamers in the world, or people that do wish to still associate themselves with T.A.C.T without necessarily having to play the same games, but play different games, but still be a part of the same social circle, that is where this process and this thinking came into play that was brought to me and Argh's attention by Aqua Megadeth and Angelus and Flint and Kids and a couple others that were on PlayStation 4 one night, and to try and expand this idea. And so me and Argh had sat about this and talked it over with a lot of the people here and talked it over amongst ourselves about trying to set this up again, and we're definitely all for this. That way this can reach that next plateau in T.A.C.T's continued existence on the grid. And for those that were paying attention or blazantly watching my updates from time to time, I previously aforementioned a point where a piece of the puzzle will need to come into place in order for T.A.C.T to reach the next step in its evolution as a totally complete and established family gaming clan for all of us. And this right now, what we're about to do in this next process in T.A.C.T's continued process of contemplation, this is that next step I was talking about. And as expected, you will all be kept up to date as we continue with the next steps that are coming here. I know this does sound scary in some sense because it's a lot of change that seems like it may be happening, but I assure you this is a gradual process over time. None of this is going to be sudden. By all means, leave a like, comment, subscribe, or just leave your thoughts all the same to T.A.C.T family and the YouTube family all the same. Leave your thoughts and just stay tuned and see exactly where this goes with our group and our family. Y'all take care.